I'm very happy to have you all join today this training on disability and on persons living with mental conditions and syndromes and their human rights. I would like to start first on the general issue of disabilities. When we have disabilities, we tend to focus on persons living with some type of physical disability, who sit in a wheelchair, and most of the measures taken for them are very different from the measures needed for dealing with other forms of disabilities. Building codes, for instance, allow for accessibility into a school, into a public building, into public transport, and so on. Those are measures related to physical disability. The discrimination they can suffer very often has to do with how people in general, or typical persons, which will be the term I will use, treat them, if they have patience or do not have patience with them. Those are examples of the type of discrimination that persons with physical disabilities encounter. Then we have persons with sensorial disabilities. Persons with sensorial disabilities are mainly those that are blind or those that are deaf. So those that stutter enter basically into that category. When we look at those with sensorial disabilities, I will focus particularly on those that are blind. Persons that are blind, we have approximately today around 27 million persons living with blindness, according to the World Health Organization. Now, if we have 27 million with full blindness, we are likely to have about 10 times more persons that live with different forms of blindness, which make them what's called legally blind. That is, they cannot drive a vehicle, or they have difficulties because they have tube viewing, which means they cannot see anything nearby. They can only see at a great distance. So we have really considerable difficulties with those that have various forms of blindness or lower vision. The world established in the year 2000 what's called the Millennium Development Goals of reducing the number of people that are poor, the number of people that are hungry, to improve access to health, to education, to potable water. Still, because we do not measure the number of blind persons appropriately, the number of blind persons from 1990 until today have actually almost trebled. It has increased 3 times. So it shows that if we do not measure something, we are unable to actually measure any progress for them. When we look at persons that stutter, that is a group where you physically cannot see that they have a form of disability. The same applies to dyslexic persons. You cannot see that they are dyslexic. You can only notice it when they are writing and some letters might be missing. In the same way, persons that stutter, it's only when they start talking that you can hear that they have that difficulty. In fact, if we were to measure the person's stuttering, we would actually realize that probably this group of persons has among the highest rates of suicide in the world, because they are so systematically discriminated against. Every time they want to say something, people start laughing at them, or in the best of cases, they complete what they are trying to say. So if they are stuttering, good, 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 and the other person who is a typical person that says good morning, more or less as if to complete, instead of looking completely normal and calm and letting them take their time. So by completing what they are saying, we actually stress them up more. Now, there are various measures that could be done. It's very interesting to note, for instance, that out of 5 persons that stutter, 4 will be men. Only 1 will be a woman. So it's much more prevalent among male than among female. And another noticeable thing with persons that stutter is when they are singing, they don't stutter. And often when they learn another language, they will not stutter in that language. So we have looked first at persons with physical disabilities. We have talked a little bit about persons with sensorial disabilities. And as you can notice, we need very different measures in society to reduce discrimination for persons that have a physical disability compared to those that have a sensorial disability. It's different public policy measures that are required. And we as individuals who are typical persons need to help in different ways or be of support in different ways to a person that has a physical disability compared to a person that has a sensorial disability. Now I turn to the third category, broad category of disabilities, which are those that live with a different type of condition, mental condition, or with a syndrome. Now, some view it as if it was a disease. It's not a disease, it's just that the brain of an autistic person is wired differently. The same with a person that has Down syndrome or Prader-Willi syndrome, or simply that had chronic undernutrition during the pregnancy of the mother and during the early years, and therefore has a very low IQ and has difficulties learning.